You switched chairs, didn't you?
Yes.
All righty, well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:02. And this is the Narragansett School Committee Budget Workshop number 1 to talk about the FY25 budget. And our topics tonight are curriculum, student services, the 3 schools, and then there'll be an opportunity for the school committee to ask any questions throughout any of the presentations or after. There'll be an opportunity for public comment after we have concluded our discussion and questions, and then we'll adjourn. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Cummings.
Great, thank you. So thank you all for being here, and particular thanks to our staff for being here tonight to go over the details of the budget. So as I said at our last meeting, and I just want to reiterate, we've asked our administrators to come in with kind of an overview of their budgets. They're not going to go through line by line, but they're going to highlight kind of the major items and major changes in the budget from previous years, and also highlight specific pieces that are important to their school plans going forward. So if you have specific questions for them along the way, please feel free to, ask away. If you have questions about any specific lines or anything along those lines, we can certainly call those up and answer those questions as well. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Gail Dandrian, our curriculum director. And Gail's responsibilities will cut across all of the schools, so we have her go first, and then we will go through student services and then go through each school. All right, so welcome, Gail.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Before we go into my budget, I just wanted to quickly review the curriculum department. It consists of myself, I work point 8 as director of curriculum, and I also have part-time district coaches. They are part-time due to the decrease in enrollment, so that's kind of new for next year. I just want to quickly, I know you have them in front of you and they're on the screen, the responsibilities for our department. I have this all listed here. Nothing's really changed since last year. Are there any of the responsibilities that you wanted me to go through specifically, or are they pretty self-explanatory?
Can you just tell us what, so the bi-yearly, the CPDC, can you just tell us what that stands for?
Yep, Curriculum and Professional Development Council. So that's a think tank for the district, and it has members from all 3 schools, and we meet twice a year where we get feedback from them about what's working for professional development, what's not working, what would they like to see. And great things come out of that. For example, the coaching cycles that I think I talked about at one of the school committee meetings came out of that, where people were like, hey, if we want to be coached and we're not a new person and we don't have new materials, where's our opportunity? So that was born from CPDC. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else from the responsibilities? Sure.
I just wanted clarification down on the 3rd bullet where it is state textbook and curriculum verification tool updates, if you could clarify that a little bit.
That's from, so the Department of Ed, every year we have to put in what are the textbooks that we use as a district. The ISBN numbers, the publisher and all that, and that's published on RIDE's website. And it's primarily used for students who go to private schools because they get their textbooks from us. So I have to update that. And curriculum verification tool, that has to do with the high quality curriculum materials that we are required to have in place through RIDE. So every year we have to go in and put if we have the tools in place. So for example, right now we have all of K-12 ELA high quality materials in place and all of K-12 math materials in place. So if you went to look on the state chart, it would show that we were all in the green for that. Science, not yet, but we're not the only ones. There's just not enough out there yet to look at. That's what that is. Sure. So the budget. So I just wanted to note that all of the curriculum materials, like the licenses and the books and the workbooks, they're budgeted under each school's budget. So that's not under my budget. Of course, I do the quotes for the principals and work with the vendors And the principals and I work together in putting those monies in their budgets, but those are not in my lines. So for example, when you see materials for my perspectives or CKLA or anything like that in the budget lines, yes, they are curriculum materials, but they're in the schools lines. One part of my budget is substitutes for instructional rounds and vertical articulation team meetings. So instructional rounds, as you know, we try to go to each school once a year. We have a problem of practice that we look for while we go into the classrooms. The subs are for teachers who join us on those instructional rounds. And the vertical articulation team meetings, we have them once a year, and those are by content areas. So I do a check-in with them once a year, excuse me, on Zoom. And from that meeting, sometimes we need to meet more often, and then we need subs for those meetings. For example, the social studies team met, and we realized that we need to start looking at the new social studies standards that have come out, and they need to be implemented. I think it's by 2026. We needed more time in that little check-in meeting, so we were released for a half a day where we met and we started to do that crosswalk. A lot of my budget is for Summer Curriculum Academy stipends. So when Dr. Cummings came here, is it 7 years ago now? He brought the idea of the Summer Curriculum Academies. And what we do is each year we put out a flyer or an invitation, whatever you want to call it, for people to sign up to be part of the Curriculum Academy. It takes place the 3 days after school is out. Thank you. And the coaches and I run the academies where we might do professional development on new materials, we might rewrite curriculum units, we might have some meetings that we couldn't have during the school year because we'd have to release them and the students would miss instruction from their primary teacher and so on. So a lot of my budget is really that Summer Curriculum Academy piece. Professional development for the curriculum team. So because our coaches do a lot of professional development for our teachers, they need to be professionally developed as well. So funds are in there for them to have professional development. An example of that would be this year, our technology coach, Vanessa Miller, went to at least 2 professional development sessions. One was through Brown University, I believe, on artificial intelligence. So then she could come back and she went to each building and gave some professional development, and then we'll be doing it again on our April PD day. So those funds are for that kind of professional development for the staff. Materials for curriculum work, such as books for book discussion groups. An example of that would be our own Dr. Cummings has run a book discussion group on building thinking classrooms for the last 2 years. So part of that hook to get people to join the group is we will buy you the book. So funds for books like that. And every now and then a teacher will ask me for a book that they saw, and I'll review it to see if it's worthwhile, and then we'll purchase it for them. Materials for new teacher orientation. As you know, this year we had quite a few new teachers, but Lauren Durney and I every year organize the new staff orientation. There is a common read that they all do. We have guest speakers for them, we provide them lunch and so on. So those materials are for those couple days of new teacher orientation, which is really important because it gives them a great start into Narragansett. So when they come back with all the other teachers, they're not trying to play catch up on, how does the district do absences and what does our evaluation system look like and so on. And finally, funds for district professional development on diversity and equity. We have our diversity equity team that meets about 6 times a year. And we also like to provide professional development for staff. An example of that would be this year on our April 2nd PD day. We have the same vendor who came a couple years ago coming and doing some professional development for our staff about how we can ensure that our kids feel included and welcomed in our classrooms and are aware of all of our differences in diversity and traditions and so on. So funds for those professional development days also come from my budget. And that's about it. There's really not that many lines in my budget. Any questions?
I have just a comment first and then a quick question. So the comment is, I just want to tell you that I've always been so impressed by the multi-year planning. There's always that long-term vision about the curriculum cycles and the mapping and the vertical teams and really thoughtful and meaningful job-embedded professional development. So I've always been super impressed by that long-term planning. I think that's great. So that's the only comment, is just keep up the great work. That's wonderful to hear. And then my question will be the same question I ask everyone is, I know your budget is not that large because of the resources and everything lives in the school budgets as it should. And then there's some grants that we know you work really hard to write. But is there anything, any kind of vision or any other stuff that you're like, boy, I really would have liked to have done X, Y, Z, whether it was, some out-of-state conference or something? Or do you feel pretty satisfied with the budget allocation for PD or what you want to do? Or is there something you're like, oh, I really would have loved to have sent a team to that conference in Nashville in July with the National Association of School Principals for Elementary, something, just
Yeah.
curious if you feel pretty good or...
I feel really good about my budget. The only thing I would kind of wish for is, with our RICAS data, one area that we could improve upon is the area of writing. And although we have reading interventionists, they focus on reading. I think we could benefit from having a writing interventionist that was maybe shared between elementary and middle school. Just a thought, because you asked me. I didn't put it in the budget. It's not even part of my budget line, but if I had a wish of something that might move the needle a little bit, it would be a writing interventionist.
And that's always tricky because the coaching for the teachers is one thing, any type of direct lessons, what's going to come out to put that in? It's always kind of that time management, whether it's at the elementary level or the middle level or the high school level. If that's going to go in, something has to come out. It's always that push-pull, but.
And we try to, when I was principal years ago, we did have the reading teachers try to do some writing intervention as well, but you just couldn't get it all in. So that would be my only comment.
All right, well, thank you. How about the rest of the school committee? Any comments or questions, anything for Gail?
I just have one question on the vertical articulation teams. Does the membership of those teams stay relatively stable?
Pretty much, because it's not that big of a commitment. It's, pretty much a once-a-year meeting unless we need to continue. And when we continue, other members are brought in anyway. So I haven't had, unless someone's retiring or for whatever reason they don't want to do it again, it stays pretty much the same. It's usually the program leaders or department chairs.
Mm-hmm. And you still on each vertical articulation team have representatives from all three schools, like the bridge between 4 to 5
Yep.
and then 8 to 9?
Yep, and it's great. And during those meetings, the first thing we do is I pull up the website, the curriculum website, and I go, okay, now what I have for the summary here, has anything changed? Because you want to be transparent if the public, goes to this website. And they might say, like, for example, this year, the middle school library teacher said, oh, we need to change that because library now has couple different things to add, so we changed that. So we go through the website, then we go through the curriculum units to say, does this one need to be updated? Do we need to add any, take any away? I asked them about professional development they might need, materials, and then we just do little kind of shout outs from each building so that, the high school people know what the elementary students are doing and so on. So it's kind of a nice meeting. I think at first when we rolled it out, and again, that was Dr. Cummins brought this when he came here, people were like, what's this VAT team, what's vertical articulation? But I think finally they understand it's really important. We only have 3 schools that we get together once a year and have these conversations. So.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for clearly outlining the ask for us. And, really proud to see that we're supporting such programs as the Diversity and Equity Team. I know I've been a part of it, and really important conversations that are ongoing there, and to hear that we are doing everything that we can, even from a budget sense, to support those conversations and our staff and thereby our students. I just had two follow-up questions. One, when it comes to professional development, how do you calculate a budget for professional development? We obviously want to be able to provide as much assistance, enough professional development as possible. So do you feel good about where we've landed on that number, or could we possibly do something more there?
Yeah, so for the diversity PD, I mean, I've already sourced out about how much it costs for the vendor to come in for a day. So that number is pretty solid, and, give or take inflation, I guess, a little bit. As far as Curriculum Academy, so when I meet with the principals when they're doing their budget, I'll ask them, so what are some ideas that you want for your school for Curriculum Academy? And then I'll ask Dr. Cummings, oh, did you have anything you wanted? And then the curriculum team and I will come up with it. And then I'm able to actually say, okay, I need this many teachers at whatever the stipend is per hour, times FICA, times Medicaid, and then that's how I get that number.
Excellent, thank you. And then just a big shout out to the Summer Curriculum Academy. Just really, really impressed and happy to hear that that's ongoing and to hear the incredible success that it's had so far. And again, just an echo, are you like 100% like confident, you feel good about the number that we've put together to support any additional academic assistance, staffing, resources when it comes to providing extra help for the students, the staff, and for all of the Summer Curriculum Academy?
I think so. I mean, I created the Summer Curriculum Academy budget as if everybody that I wanted to come came, and not everybody comes all the time because, they're going on vacation, whatever. So I'm usually in pretty good shape with that.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the school committee? All right, thank you very much. So our next agenda item is student services with Dr. Denton.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. I'm joined by Mrs. Jill Haig, who's our Assistant Director. The Office of Student Services can sometimes be thought of just as the special education office, because Jill and I are obviously certified as special ed administrators. But I think it's important for you to understand our other hats that we wear, because we take on other roles that are really more general education in our district. So I am the special ed administrator, but I'm also the District 504 coordinator, the multilingual learner coordinator, the homeless coordinator, the ESSA foster care coordinator, and then I oversee all of our students who are out of district as the LEA. Jill takes on the role of the assistant director in special ed, but she's also your district early childhood coordinator who oversees all of our child find screening and our preschool programs, and then our multi-tier system of support, which is our intervention program for the district, Jill coordinates. In all of my years of doing budget presentations as a special ed director, I always feel like I have to give a little bit of background, because a lot of things in our budget are kind of non-negotiable because they're mandated by federal or state law. Both IDEA and Rhode Island state regulations require us to provide all students who are identified with a disability a free, appropriate public education in their least restrictive environment. Least restrictive environment means wherever they would be educated without a disability, unless their IEP team determines that they need something more restrictive or something different in order to meet their needs. So we're not really ever supposed to take in the fiscal cost. It really needs to be focused on what does this child need in order to access their education. We also have to be very careful about confidentiality. So occasionally we'll be asked a question that we can't answer. And that's because we're a small district. And when we answer a question, it could be identifiable due to a small number of students receiving that type of service in our district. And that all decisions are made by not us as the administrators, but by the IEP teams for each individual student, with the family and the parents being actively involved in that process. So we've given you a little bit of information about our eligibility. When Jill came shortly before I did, and when that data for October 2019, about 20% of the Narragansett population was eligible for special ed, even though the state statistic was really around 16%. Jill and the building administrators have worked really hard to make sure that students have the interventions that they need so that we're not identifying students as having a disability who really just have a learning gap that we can address during an intervention. We've also looked at our process for eligibility and evaluating, and really worked with even our general educators on identifying what does suspicion of a disability look like, and then what is our responsibility as a school district to address that. I've then given you a little bit of information about our enrollment and staffing. And right now, our elementary, what Jill and I do, we actually start this in December, early December. We begin looking at how many students will be leaving preschool and going to kindergarten, how many students will be leaving fourth grade and going to fifth, how many will be going from eighth to ninth, and then graduating or moving to our transition. And then based on that, we're able to do an anticipated enrollment, and we're able to go through each IEP and figure out what are the needs and the services and begin to draft caseloads and schedules for for our case managers, our special educators, to determine what do we actually need for staff. And so you'll see from this data that our elementary school will stay pretty stable, although we've had some students that have exited and some students who have been found eligible. The number will remain around 25. That does not include our preschool students who are eligible or our students who are speech and language only, because those needs are being met by a group of staff. Our middle school is where we're having a decreasing enrollment globally. You're going to hear that in just a little bit when Mrs. Johnson speaks. But we also know that this is impacting our students. When we think about the number of students that are moving from 8th grade to 9th grade who have an IEP versus the number of students moving from 4th to 5th, it's a very different number. And so there will be a change of about 10 students. So we have worked very carefully as a leadership team at the middle school, Dr. Cummings, Karen, Jill, and myself, to think about how can we best staff to fully meet the needs of our students, but make sure we're being fiscally responsible about our staffing. And so we are recommending a 1.1 FTE decrease in special education for our middle school. Our high school will remain very similar. I actually anticipate I will have a slightly higher number of IEPs going into next school year. I am around 68 right now, and when I look at the students who will be leaving and those that are entering, we're starting off at a strong 64, and that does not include the students that will be accepted from CTE or coming to us from Jamestown. And so I do anticipate that number to be probably closer to 70, but I have already worked with the high school administration and leadership team and the high school department head, and I actually have the schedules and the caseloads done for all of the high school teachers. And so I know that we can meet the needs and make sure that students have access to challenging and rigorous coursework with the staffing that we have there. About 2 years ago, one of our occupational therapists retired, and Dr. Cummings and I had been having conversations since we have decreasing enrollment, that we need to be very mindful about our related service providers also. So what we did, instead of replacing that occupational therapist, we replaced that role with a contract service provider. And so what we're able to do is every year we're able to look at the student needs, look at the needs that our current employees are able to meet, and then determine how many hours. And so currently we contract for 15 hours of occupational therapy services that work primarily with our preschoolers and our kindergartners. So this year, Mrs. Mary Patty retired from the elementary school at the end of December. She was a 0.75 FTE, And we are replacing her with also contract services. So we have 2 full-time speech and language pathologists in the district. And what they'll do is our preschool elementary provider will develop that caseload. Our middle school, high school will develop that caseload. And then depending on what is needed based on those schedules, we'll hire a certain number of hours in order to meet the needs for next school year. This will give us flexibility in both of these areas to adjust based on enrollment as students enter and exit, because we can adjust hours very easily with contract service providers. In consulting with our physical therapist, who actually works, this is pretty unique for a district, works with a student potentially from preschool all the way till their 22nd birthday in our district. Her needs are changed, the needs of her population is also changing, and so we're just decreasing her slightly from a 0.9 to a 0.8 FTE. If you, or when you, I'm sure you did, look through the lines of the budget, you may notice some increases in tuitions. What we do is we go through every student who we anticipate to be out of district for next school year. We take into consideration that most out of district placements have an increase of 3 to 5%, so we calculate that in so we don't have any surprises, and then we build that into the budget. You may have also noticed that a few of our lines look like they've not been really touched as much this year, and that's because over the last 3 years, there was COVID money through the IDEA, American Rescue Plan, ARP grant. And based on that grant, which ended in September, so we had to spend all of our funds or we lost them, in some situations, we knew we needed specific equipment or materials, or instead of buying a 1-year license, we bought a 5-year license so that we didn't have to give those funds back to the government. And so we've been able to use that. In one of my other roles, the multilingual language MLL coordinator, Mrs. Christine Izzy left us in December to move to a different school district. Her position had been a 0.5. We were able to find a long-term sub. We had her come in. She is actually working for us full-time as a long-term sub right now, but she is doing a really great job really assessing what are our needs as a district, using the WIDA and access scores, the screeners, and the state regulations around MLL to determine what are our actual needs and how do we best service all of our students. We've also had some new families just since January who have moved into the district where English is not their first language. So it's been a real blessing to have her because we've been able to fully integrate all of the new students into our district, and they're all doing amazing. So I think that that's all we have for you. If you have questions for either of us, we're here to answer them for you, if we can.
I have a question about the speech and language pathologist. So I understand the reduction of the 0.75, and I understand the contracted services. So is the proposed to have 2 full-time or 1?
So right now, we had 2.75. So we'll maintain the 2.
Yeah.
One that's primary preschool, elementary, and one that's more middle school, high school, and transition program. And then we will work within the next month to look at the caseload because
Yes.
Sometimes elementary students, they're being exited from services during their elementary years. So we really need to look at what those numbers look like. And then from there, we'll put together a number of hours. The current person, I think, is working 18 to 20 hours for us this semester.
So that makes sense. So I think you have a typo in our little budget workshop.
Oh.
Not up there. Up there is correct.
Okay.
But we have a little chart that
Does
says
it say
current.
1?
Yeah, it says current 2.75, proposed 1.0 FTE plus
Okay.
contract services.
It should be 2.0.
Okay.
I made that correction, but Lauren may have already copied it
Yep,
at
no
that
problem.
point.
And you explained that in your presentation, and it's right up there. It's correct up there of the reduction of the 0.75, so.
Thank you for clarifying
Okay, yeah, no
that.
problem. That makes sense. So what other questions do any school committee members have about student services and special education?
I had a question about the speech and language. I'm sorry, you said 18 outsourcing hours?
So it's about 18 to 20 hours right now.
So that would be around a 0.5 if that was a staffed person?
0.5, 0.6 maybe.
And is the number comparable for the outsourcing hours as it would be for a .5 position?
I think, yeah, oh, do you mean the cost? The cost is less for contracted service. Yes, and what we can do is, right now, we might be at 18 to 20 hours, but if our population decreases come September, I can change that to 10 hours if I need to. So mid-year, it's really hard to go to my preschool, elementary, my middle school, high school transition teacher and say, since their schedule is already set, to say, I need you to pick up these students. Where when we start the year off, we can have already embedded that in and then identified what is the actual need for hours.
And my second question was, so there wasn't a replacement since the half year because Miss Patty retired?
Actually, our contract service person started the week before Mrs. Patty left so that there was a transition.
Okay, all right. Because that was just going to be my other question was, is there ever a time where you're working with outsourcing and then we don't have control on maybe any gaps in the services for the kiddos? If it was in-house, then I would think that would be different.
Well, if we even had somebody in-house, if they needed to take a medical leave, I would still, or some sort of leave, maternity leave, any type of leave, I'd still need to find someone to cover. So, you know, we work really hard to make sure that we're trying to get ahead of things. And so whenever we can anticipate, we're posting months before we think we're actually going to need the person. The person that we have right now is doing a great job and is I think interested in staying with us in September. And so if that's possible, we're gonna pursue that because we want to have consistency. What we don't want, and if this is, you know, a concern you're raising, I completely support you. I wouldn't want a contract service provider that's here for 2 months and then I get a new contract service provider, right? That would not be what's in the best interest of our students. Even our occupational therapist who started like 2 years ago, I've already gotten an email from her provider. Will she be working for you this summer? Would you like her back next year? Yes, capital letters, exclamation point, exclamation point. But then I have to add the little note, but I need to double check what hours we need because I don't want to commit to 16 if we don't need 16, right? It gives us this incredible flexibility that we wouldn't normally have when we hire somebody like a .5 FTE.
On all the 3 schools, the job title of special educator, and then the additional one is intensive special educator. Is that an additional certification?
Yeah, no, it's not, but let me tell you a little bit about it, and then if Jill wants to add anything. Last year, since COVID, our little babies, our 3-year-olds.
Do you mean the middle school intensive?
No, I think you said preschool, right?
I think just the difference between intensive.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, right, so we'll talk just briefly about this. We found that a lot of our 3-year-olds who were coming in from early intervention weren't ready to be in a class of 13 to 15 students. They needed something more intensified, more specific to their needs, smaller one-on-one support. And so we created an early childhood special educator that works now preschool to grade 1 or 2. And then we have our 5 preschool. And then you'll see in the middle school and the high school, I have special educators and then special educators that are intensive. And what that means is the students that they're working with may be on alternate assessment, working towards a very modified curriculum, and may need more small group instruction. Their instruction might be more life skills based. And so it's our students who are more significantly impacted by their disabilities. And so in some cases, such as our high school and our middle school, that person does have a different certificate, but they're all special educators.
Okay, thank you.
I have the same question about anything that you really struggled with that didn't get in this budget, because last year it was a kind of we talked about that additional psychologist position, which we talked it through in these early stages, and then, it was a definite need, and we figured out how to make it happen. So is there anything that didn't, and it's not a wish list, it's a need, but you have to prioritize everything. You have to,
Absolutely. So, of course, we anticipated, because you told us that you were going to be asking this, so we appreciate that. So really, our comments on that is, we want to thank you. The school psychologist has been a tremendous impact. I think the high school leadership team would echo that. This year, we had an unexpected leave of our school psychologist at the elementary school for a period of time. And actually, Miss Lucy was able to go down and help them while we found someone to fill in for that period of time. When we went into the budget process, one of my asks was, can we keep this position? It's so important. It's had such an impact on our entire school culture. And they were able to put that in. So I don't have to ask because it's there. But I would, we both fully endorse what you're going to hear from our colleagues. We've spent time with all of the building principals, and we believe that the things that they're going to mention when you ask them are going to have a tremendous impact on all students and really help to address the needs of our students before we need to find them eligible for special education. So I would just endorse what you're about to hear from our colleagues.
thank you. Do any other school committee members have comments or questions?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment, just thanking you for just how well articulated you explained this very important portion of the budget. And just to echo just how non-negotiable, this portion of the budget is and just how important it is and that it's regulated by the federal and state. So I was just wondering, just since we're being recorded here, if you could just provide a little soundbite as to what the federal and state does to support this portion of the budget, like any funding, any aid, anything along those lines.
Interesting question, Alex. So the federal government gives regulations and laws that we need to follow. I've talked about free appropriate public education. I've talked about least restrictive environment. Obviously, there's far more to that list. There is a consolidated resource plan, we call it the CRP grant, that is federal dollars that comes to us yearly. And so we do receive a small portion of money that goes towards really covering what they call extra costs. So it's supposed to supplement, not supplant, your general budget. And so we do have those dollars, but there's an expense to the district, but all students deserve access to their education.
Yes.
But it's mostly unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
So if you did research on the IDEA, you would find that when it was in 1975, when it first began, there were expectations that it would be fully funded, and today, 2024, it has never been fully funded by the federal government, nor has it been reauthorized. It is a law that is in desperate need of reauthorization.
Well, thank you so much for walking us through all of this and to, basically reinforce that we are all here to support all students and couldn't do that without this, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, yes. So quick question, you touched on this briefly. We're coming off of COVID, we had a bunch of grant money. And you mentioned that in here that more grant money came in from different grants to cover this year. Is that, I kind of want to get your view, is that going to continue, or is that kind of like, we were just playing it by?
Now, the COVID money has come to an end.
Yeah.
And so that money we had for about 2.5 years, with September 2023
Yeah.
being the last moment. If you didn't spend it by that date, they took it back from you. And so, again, that money was not ever expected to supplant, meaning take over or allow you to remove things from the budget. It was really to supplement and make sure they were able to fill the gaps and we would address the needs of our students. So No, we'll continue to have our federal grant that I just talked about for both preschool and IDEA. And if you'd like to see more specifics on that, I can certainly provide it to you. But I don't anticipate that. I think we're all done with COVID money.
My question was more about I guess, the second grant, not the COVID grant.
Yeah, so what I can kind of give you an overview about is, so first of all, to address the COVID funding, and certainly there was the special education funding, there was also the ESSER money, right, which was kind of the bigger dollars. We got about $2 million over the COVID years. So we're cutting approximately 4.5 positions this year, partially due to the fact that that COVID money no longer exists, right? And so we're taking some of those supports and putting them in the regular budget, because although the money has dried up, the student need has not gone away, right? Part two is overall, we do receive every year, some federal funding overall. The vast majority of the Narragansett budget comes from local funding, right? And so, we are one of the highest, and I can get you the exact number, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but of all the towns in Rhode Island, we are amongst the highest, if not the highest, proportion of our school budget that comes from local sources.
Yep. So my question is, and I don't think I articulated it correctly, IDEA B and the PK federal grant.
That's
Now,
an annual grant.
those are annual grants, so they're not a replacement for the COVID. Okay.
No, that money has always happened and will continue to happen. It is the way the federal government attempts to address the need around their mandates.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. I thought so, but I wanted to clarify, because it got mixed up with, like, they're both IDEA, So, okay, thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from any school committee members?
Yes, I just had one question. Is there a more detailed line item when it comes to supplies and such like that, but that lives in the school, I believe? Is that correct? So we'll be seeing, we can ask about those questions specifically in student services and supplies or needs at the school. So we would ask that, like, if that was at the high school, we would ask that for the high school, middle school, and elementary school. That's how the money is presented in the budget?
So there are there are two different lines for supplies and materials. And now I'm going to tell you more than you want to know. So UCOA code, Jill laughs because I know my codes. UCOA code 10 is a general education code. UCOA code 20 is special education. So all students are general ed students. Some students receive special education in addition to their general education programming. So all needs that are typically provided for any student in a school are provided through the school budget. If we had an IEP meeting and a very specific piece of equipment, technology, furniture, a service was required, that would be considered an extraordinary cost above the general education curriculum, and that would come out of our budget.
So your budget right now accounts for that? Okay.
It does.
Okay, thank you.
You're
I was
welcome.
just confused with what lives where, that's all.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we are moving on to the schools. And Dr. Cummings, it looks like we're going with high school, middle school, elementary school. Is that the order you want to do? Okay, great. All right, Narragansett High School.
Good evening. I'm proud to announce that Mr. McCloskey, high school AP, is here with us tonight. And I also wanted to take a moment to recognize Ms. Biafor, who's our dean and our world language department head, for being here with us tonight. I think the goal for Narragansett High School is consistently to enhance our opportunities, but stay within the same framework that we've been using. And I think it's difficult for parents on the outside, for people on the outside of education to fully grasp what that means in the current climate. Because people look at schools and they look at education and they think that they see a lot of similarities to when they went to school. And some of those do exist, yet there's so many differences in terms of what happens now in education, from the unfunded mandates, things that are being passed down by RIDE, from situations that students are dealing with today that maybe students in the past didn't have to deal with. And so I think once you start to look at all of those things, our goal is how do we maintain everything that we have and get better at the same time without increasing the amount of money that we have to spend to do it. So that's where you start to get creative and look at all of the pieces of the puzzle. And when you put the pieces of the puzzle together, the goal is to make sure that every single student has an equitable access to an education that's going to prepare them for whatever that situation is. So we're trying to personalize the education system and this journey, this educational journey for each student. Then you have RIDE, who comes in and changes the secondary regulations. So starting next year with the class of 2028, we obviously have some new guidelines. And again, a couple of those are listed there. And I tried to put some of the important ones that are really affecting us, such as every single student will take and successfully pass Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. Every single student, no exception, and you have to pass those classes. Now, we have options currently for our students in the high school currently to get through their math requirements. Sometimes it doesn't always include that same pathway. Now, without any safety net, without any alternative in place, and we've had multiple conversations with RIDE in terms of how we can help support them in that venture, and they don't want to budge, we have to make sure that we have a plan in place to address those needs of all students. World language, again, having a 2-year commitment. For some people, they're going to say they should be taking a language for 2 years, right? And we encourage taking a language for 4 years. Well, we used to have students who were language exempt, which doesn't really exist anymore. So again, this is the ever-evolving world in which we live, and we have to adjust to their needs. There's a financial literacy component, there's a work-based learning component of 80 hours, which doesn't exist right now. So again, where are they going to get 80 hours? And our CTE students will have no problem, because that's built into the CTE programs. We're looking at possible solutions, right? I think it would be wonderful to have internships where students can get out into the real world and kind of explore areas of interest that they might want to, have a career in, and, be able to see in the workforce what's going to help make them successful and kind of bridge that gap between what's happening in school and what they can take with them to be successful in, post-secondarily. There's some courses we can offer and we can think about, like an entrepreneurship class, which is sort of run like a company, and people run for certain positions. Things like that would be able to get them hours as well. So we're going to have to continue to be creative in that regard. Throughout this whole, again, journey, we're trying to increase opportunities regardless of where someone's going to end up after Narragansett High School. The person who's going to work should be challenged just as much as the person who's going to a 2-year school, the person who's going to a service academy, or the person who's going to a 4-year school, right? That is for personal growth. And that's where we're trying to personalize each and every opportunity. They need equal access, they need a rigorous, robust curriculum, and course selection for which they can choose and avail themselves. We've increased the number of electives that we have offered in various courses, in various disciplines, so that people can, branch out. Sometimes they're maybe a humanities person, right? So we have some English and social courses that we've added. And sometimes they're more interested in STEM, and we have some of those. We've added some CTE courses. Not all of our students are CTE students, but a overwhelming majority of our students access the CTE options that we have, which is a huge benefit and something that they get to take with them when they leave. So it's important to have those as well. Consistent CTE support for those students, again, for the students that are in the programs and how they're going to use that program to their benefit and have some options beyond, that's a continuous effort. And Mr. McCloskey does a tremendous job working with the CTE program. He oversees the CTE program and, working with trusted individuals in the communities who can provide options for our students. And we just had a meeting this afternoon. I don't know if you want to just briefly talk about that real fast.
Yeah, sure. So we just had a local advisory board meeting where we just had our industry partners in. So our industry partners came in and talked about work-based learning opportunities to try to, again, capitalize on those internships that would be part of that work-based learning graduation requirement.
And sometimes some of our students who are just challenging themselves in a class might see something like that and then be able to make a switch, because that might be something that they really find that they like, they enjoy, and they could see themselves doing. So that's extremely important. The mental health services that we see on a daily basis is overwhelming. It's another one of those areas that I think a lot of people on the outside don't recognize. It goes on every single day. And we need to be ready to act upon every single one, because every single person is important and every single issue is important. And just because you think someone should be able to deal with something doesn't mean that they're equipped to deal with it. And that's why they need the supportive elements of our counselors and our clinicians, our administrative team, our teachers, and we spend a lot of time building relationships with our students for that very, very reason, because every single student has a different trusted adult, and that's only where it starts. And then it starts to grow from there. And we have a collaborative effort in which we support our students. We've maintained our Mariner classes with our counselors, and in addition to what the counselors do sort of on their own, the high school dean position has been reduced to a .4 position, and that's an extremely difficult job to really balance. And I think Ms. Biafor has done a great job acclimating to that position and being able to balance the responsibilities, because you're going from one to the other on a dime, and you have to be able to adjust and take care of some of those issues. We have a number of pieces in place in the district for safety, like Securely and Gaggle, where we get alerts based on certain things that come up. Students' emails, anything that they do on the district devices are screened, and there's keywords that will send us messages as to something that needs attention. And when that happens, we don't have the time to wait for somebody to get to that email and see it, because so somebody's really in charge of that. A lot of that falls on Ms. Biafor and being available and ready to address those needs. In addition to disciplinary needs, I think every parent would agree that the most effective use of dealing with those is dealing with it in a timely fashion, right? You're not going to deal with an issue 3 days later or a week later, right? It should be timely so that it's relevant and meaningful for the individual. So all of that really falls under maintaining staffing. So doing all of those things and still trying to maintain the staff we have was our goal. And I think we did a tremendous job of doing that and not really expanding upon that. And then there's the technology piece. We've added Naviance, which is a college and career readiness platform, and it's going to be taking over for Zello, which we currently have. Naviance is a lot more involved. They have a lot more options. Students can do things from aptitude tests. They can do little programs where they learn about learning preferences for themselves. It's tied into college and career. They could look up career clusters. They could do college searches. All of this is in conjunction with their parents so that there's support at home and then their support at school as they start to do that in their Mariner classes and with their counselors. And then there's Smart Pass, which is a digital pass system to try to make sure that we can maintain order, we can stay on top of who's going where, we minimize disruption in the classroom, we try to maximize time on task with our students. So that was another small piece of trying to, gain access to some digital passes.
So I have the same question that I'm going to ask every principal too. So this is, you have to defend your budget with Dr. Cummings and make some hard choices and prioritize what is an urgent dire need for right now, what can wait till next year. So my ask is there anything that didn't make it in? And it could be as small as, furniture for the library versus a full-time staff position, like, it's big or small, we want to hear. Is there anything that you couldn't prioritize for this coming budget?
So funny that you mentioned furniture, because we really put our heads together and tried to look at something that we thought was going to be meaningful for the students. And we really have been trying all year to, like by hook or by crook, to create a Zen Den for students, which was sort of like an intermediate step. We have so many of our students who go see the counselors and clinicians for mental health issues and the needs and how they are trying to deal with some coping mechanisms for some of the things that they're dealing with. And we thought a Zen Den would be like a great intermediate step where they would go there rather than going directly maybe to their counselor, and we would have that staffed by an individual, somebody that we have in the building. We are also looking at some of the top programs in the state, master's programs for social work, for counseling, and for psychology to see if we can get some interns that might help support, and that could be like a, quid pro quo situation where we're helping develop some individuals and they're sort of helping us, and it would also give us sort of a lifeline into people that are really good for potential future hires as well. So we would need some flexible furniture. That's sort of like how the rooms are made, like beanbag chairs and some other things like that. The unfortunate part is that's a little bit pricey these days because it seems to be a lot of the rage, the flexible furniture. But that would be the one thing that we didn't get to include in the budget.
It's a really interesting idea. So the question is, do you have a classroom or office or a space? Could you figure out how to staff it? So what is your budget ask? Is it for some money for the actual furniture? Is it for some money for furniture plus possible like staffing, whether it's a teacher assistant that works with the, like, what's your ask?
So we have a room allocated that we could utilize. We would not ask for money for staff. We would figure that out within. The money would be for the furniture to sort of like house the room and make it appealing for students to go in, because you have to create a certain atmosphere within that room so they can sort of like decompress. They have that intermediate step, as I mentioned, of kind of like dealing with some of the issues. And then, if they need to move on to the next person, a counselor, clinician, et cetera, then we go on to the next step. Because sometimes it's not necessarily that. Sometimes we have a number of students who say, I just want to go for a walk. Okay, well, we can't let you go for a walk. You know what I'm saying? But, okay, so they might walk around, get a drink of water and then go back to class. Sometimes that's all they need. They just need to sort of clear their head and get themselves right where they can go back into a learning environment. And again, so I would say, conservatively speaking, it's probably going to be somewhere, I don't want to scare anybody, but it's somewhere around $20,000, $25,000 for that furniture. It's just that expensive, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean,
If it could be done for less, then
Yeah.
That's great,
Single, like, really interesting flexible chairs are like $800 to $1,500 for a chair.
Right.
Like, it's really extensive. I think that's really super interesting. Is it safe to assume, have you talked to Dr. Denton about this idea?
Yes.
Yeah. And so a problem I foresee is you make this awesome space, and then the Pierce School and the elementary school are going to want the same thing unless they, do you already have something like that at the elementary? Not really, yeah, so. Well, I think it's really interesting. I would 100% support that if we can figure that out, because it's absolutely a need, because there's students that are dysregulated, whether they're anxious, whether they're overwhelmed, whether they're in crisis, and there's lots of different things that they need, and sometimes it's a discipline issue and it's a discipline space, and sometimes a school counselor, it's really kind of set up for an academic counseling, and individual psychologists and stuff probably have little offices and stuff like that, so it's really interesting to have a mindfulness space. I love the name. And really, they just need a place where they can go, feel calm, get regulated, use some strategies, and then, you know, get back engaged in their learning. So I love that idea. So I'd like to hear from the rest of the school committee. What do you all think about the high school's request for, if possible, an additional allocation for furniture specifically for the purpose of this mindfulness space to support students?
Well, I can't wait to share this with the Health and Wellness Committee. I know, yeah, right. Well, just even the idea, you know, I've been very impressed with your contribution so far to the Health and Wellness Committee, your feedback, transparency, everything that you've shared with us up to this point. To hear this idea, and I know, you know, I'll ask my follow-up questions after, you know, my personal opinion. I love this idea. I know that this committee as a whole has been pretty big advocates for healthy minds, healthy bodies, and promoting anything towards mental health awareness and just health and wellness as a whole. So I think this is a great idea that you've brought to the table, and I hope that we can do everything we can to support you.
Thank you.
Alex, you want to go with your other questions or comments
Sure, I'll
about
just
anything?
jump right in.
Sure.
Really impressed with your presentation. What stood out to me was that we're being fiscally responsible, but not at the expense of providing a high-quality, equitable education to all students. And then, you know, again, very happy to see that mental health awareness continues to be a top priority, because it is super important, and to highlight that we are bringing these very important resources to the staff and students, that it's this accessibility that so many districts lack, is a big shout out to our district. So very happy to hear that continues to be a top priority. And then 2 questions just in general, since again, we have a very interested public watching at home. Is it expected regarding, let me see if I can follow my line here, work-based learning component, is it expected to be completed during regular school hours?
Again, I think that we're waiting for a lot more of the legislation to come forward, but there will be flexibility in terms of what they need to complete.
Okay. And then regarding financial literacy, maybe again, we're waiting to hear more back on that, but how would one prove financial literacy? Is it just a regular course? Is it a test?
So we have a course, actually. We were a little bit ahead of the curve, and so we have a financial literacy course. It used to be an elective. Now it'll just be mandated for, you know, class of 2028 moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you. That's everything I have on my end.
Are there any other questions from the school committee?
I had just a couple of questions. There were a couple of points that really stuck out to me as an educator and a parent, and I thank you for bringing them up. You know, how you tied in to be able to maintain and get better without spending more, haha, and equitable and personalized. One thing that's been missing in this budget is sports, so I'm assuming that maybe we can talk just a little bit about if the line items for coaches, high school coaches fall in there, equipment. We did have a couple of sports talk throughout this year since I've been on the committee. And I am a huge advocate in personalization and equitability. And I just wonder if you could talk about that. I mean, is sports part of, you know, mental health and sports are 100% tied together, physical education and sports. If my daughter got to a high school where her sport wasn't as supported as much, that would greatly affect my family's mental health, my whole family's mental health. Parents invest so much in sports. They do it partially because it's a healthy activity. They want to keep the kids on the right track. The kids love it. They learn how to be a team. There's so many things. So even though that's not like the core to education, to me, that's pretty close to almost as important because it's an extracurricular that makes the whole school culture jive. So does sports fall in your realm at all?
It does. It's a little different because the athletic director creates that budget, and that budget is included within the high school budget. But the athletic director obviously has the RRL, fees and all those other things that kind of make up the athletic budget. But it definitely falls under, I believe it's at the tail end, correct, of the high school budget line items. And we discussed it, but there was nothing, that was really a major change, again, that we're trying to add. The things that we've tried to do, as I mentioned, sort of within our means, but still provide opportunities. And case in point, this year, we're trying to, for the spring, have a sailing club that's, again, crosses the line between athletics and, activity, because it's really a club, it's not really a sport. So, again, that's just one example, but we've really tried to make sure that we address all needs and, maintain as much equity as possible, even in the athletic arena.
So I've had a request from the audience to ask a question after each school instead of at the end. I'm fine with that. If the rest of the committee is, are you okay if we allow people from the audience now, if they have a question about student services, curriculum, or high school, to ask a question, then we'll do the same thing after the peer school and the elementary school? You guys okay with that? Okay. And before we do that, are there any other questions from the school committee for Narragansett High School?
I just have one. Oh, I'm sorry. Going back to the Industry Advisory Board for our CTE programs, and I know you mentioned that they'd be utilized for work-based learning and internships and hands-on type learning. Will they also be utilized to review curriculum to make sure they're meeting industry needs and standards?
Yeah, so that's part of what they did today. Was the first thing they did was look at our current curriculum, the courses and what is covered. Then they looked at the credentials that we're already covering, and then they discussed, like, if you were interviewing our kids, what would they be doing, and what would they need to know. And then they looked at work-based learning opportunities that they would or could be offering in the future. The next step of that is to meet again, and then we would have students at that meeting. And the idea would be they show what they do and what they know how to do. And so that's like the curriculum in action, and then we'll get the industry partners to comment on that too.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. So, question about the AP courses. You mentioned that, we're continuing to offer them. 3 new ones, which is I'm really happy to hear, have been offered this year. Is this, like, you're going to continue to engage, offer professional development, and potentially more AP classes? Is this something, you need more budget for? Is this something that is like more of just a continuing plan?
Well, each time you add a course, you need somebody trained to teach that course.
Yeah.
So that's where the PD comes in, and unfortunately, it's not cheap. It's $1,000 or so a course, just for that person to get trained. And then anything that they want to do, beyond that, to make sure that they're prepared, to address all the needs of the students and to get them where they need to be successful on the exam. So I would love to continue to add courses, as we see fit. At some point, you can't have so many courses that they're not being filled. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, especially when we have a small school like this.
Right. So I think we need a balance of, are we addressing the needs that we have? Are we preparing the students to move on for life after high school? And are they doing well enough in those courses? Or do we need to prepare them in a different way, which would be additional professional development?
So, Justin, I think the high school has a really nice plan in terms of getting students experience in different quote-unquote levels of AP classes, and some AP classes are a bit more accessible to younger learners than others. So, for example, we have lots of our sophomores taking AP Human Geography. right? And so that is a really accessible course for a younger student. And so the high school has really looked at what are other opportunities for students to get into those courses. The second thing that they've done really nicely is to really push forward the goal that we want every student to access at least one AP class before they graduate. And I think that there are lots of opportunities for students to do that. So for example, AP pre-calculus, right, is for students that may not otherwise take a college level mathematics course. That's a college level mathematics course, right, that students can take while they're a senior. AP environmental science, AP psych, right? So, you know, we have the really hard ones, AP Chem, AP Calc, you know, AP Lit, but we also have ones that they're certainly rigorous and are certainly hard, but they may be a bit more accessible. So that's why we want to continue to expand to get all kids into those courses.
All right. Awesome. Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions or comments from the school committee before we open things up? So I just, before we do that, I want to circle back to the ask for furniture for the Zenden. So Alex and I, I'm hearing we both support that. For the rest of the school committee, can you weigh in if you would support that additional ask, opposed, indifferent? Any thoughts on, this would be kind of directing Karen and Pete to relook at the budget, to look for $25,000 to $30,000 specifically for this purpose, without okay, well, Chris has to cut 25 from the high school. This is figure something out. So thoughts from the rest of the committee?
I think it should be explored.
Agreed. One-off expenditures usually tend to get my support, because especially if they're, as we noticed, post-COVID, a lot more need of this kind of behavioral treatment. Would it be good? Yeah. So it can, yeah.
Jen?
I mean, I look at things from like a raw number perspective, and I really think that traditionally, there may be some things that need to be where we need to become equitable for certain student populations before we can entertain looking at that. I feel like line item wise, I don't have enough information to where I feel morally I could ask for that, when I felt like there were some students that needed other things that were more smaller populations. The one good thing about that, I mean, I think it's a great idea, don't get me wrong, I think it's a great idea, and if we could have a wish list and fulfill everything, I think that's great. So, and it's a community thing, and it affects all students in the high school. I mean, so that, from that perspective, I feel in general, I would really have to listen to the rest of the budget to really entertain that. I mean, the budget for the middle school and the elementary school in the next budget session. But I think it's a wonderful idea. And I think it's something, it's become a need. It's become a need. It's not an extra anymore. So I think we just have to weigh that.
All right, thank you. And it sounds like you have support from me, Alex, Justin, and Diane definitely wants to explore it too. So I like the word explore. So Pete, can you explore that? And if that's a budget add, how would that fit into the big picture, and come back to us at the second workshop with that?
Absolutely.
Because it is a bit more than we usually give out for this kind of thing.
It's just it's what people want to do. Last year,
last year
the ad was a FTE school psychologist.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
probably 125,000. So
That's true.
it's not it's whether we think it's for the greater good
That's kind of like
and
a
worth the,
community
well, I mean, I think it's worth exploring to the next workshop, because again, it sounds like this is a space for all students would be able to access. It's not just for students with disabilities or students with 504s or students, this is for students that have anxiety or are dysregulated, or, you know, to try to get them to use a strategy to then re-engage in their learning. So I like the word explore. Pete, can you explore that and come back to us with some options?
Yes.
Thanks. There we go. So if we open up to questions from the audience, which was going to be at the very end of the meeting, where would they? Okay, so why don't you give us a minute? We'll set up our microphone a little early here.
all set, Pete? Oh, you guys are fast.
Oh, that was quick.
All right, so at this time, is there anyone from the audience that has any questions about curriculum, special services, or Narragansett High School? Come on up and state your name, and you can ask your question or comment. If the high school principal is able to give a high-level answer, great. If not, it may be you have to circle back and make that information available, and we'll hear about it next week. But if you're able to listen to the question or comment and give a high-level answer, great. If you need to, you don't know what the questions are, if you don't have that information, then we'll have it for next week. All right, thanks. Come on up and say your name, please.
My name is Jerry Bonner. This is Ethan Travis. He's a sophomore at Narragansett High School. Just wanted to start off by thanking everybody. This is a really great school system to be part of. Appreciate everybody's efforts. We know where this comment or question comes in the totem pole. It was already alluded that the sports line item was on the bottom of the agenda, or the bottom of the budget item line list. But with that said, I came here in November and talked just a minute about school sports, specifically about hockey. I don't think there's another sport out there, and I could be wrong, that have to pay 80% of their practice time to practice twice a week. And that's not a knock on Matt Mahar, our athletic director. It's not a knock on our new principal or anybody. It's more of just an FYI, just saying that there is certainly a high demand for financial funds to participate in hockey, and we know the cost is high compared to tennis, to track and fields, sports that I used to play. I completely understand that. But a common theme that I heard here from a lot of presenters was equity. From every presenter that came today was talking about equity and what it took to make sure that every student had what they need to be successful. And that's what I'm coming here today for. We had another individual by the name of Ryan Maricas. He was a senior that was also here to support that ask is potentially more resources for our student athletes as it pertains to hockey, not only for the men or the young men, but also for the ladies. We know there's a lot of variables to it. It's not only here in Narragansett, but there's also a co-op between Charahoe, and on the girls' side, Ethan, you might have to help me out who the girls are playing with. I don't know.
NK and SK.
Thank you.
Co-op.
Thank you. And so that's really the ask, and I don't even know the dynamics of what it costs, what Narragansett pays for buses, what Narragansett pays for the supplies of pucks, what Narragansett supplies for, those types of line items. But with that said, it's still, on us, on the parents, on the kids, to fundraise 80% of their practice time for twice a week. I can tell you that there's school systems out there that practice 3 times a week, and they don't have to fundraise anything for their ice time. It's paid for in full, and that's Lincoln, Cumberland, EG, Pilgrim, Tollgate. Not one of these towns I've mentioned has a rink of their own, like a West Warwick or a Burrowville or a Cranston. Those are all towns that don't have those abilities. There are towns like SK and Rogers that do the same thing that we do. And we understand that. I just feel as though we're a school system that would be able to do more. And that's the only ask I have. And I'll end with my appreciations of the board. I understand where we rank. You have a daunting task of salaries, of great programs. So I really appreciate everybody's efforts and comments. So, do you want to say that?
I would like to look back at Mrs. Armstrong talking about how, hockey means a lot to me. I go to school. That's kind of the main thing why I keep my grades up for hockey. And I'd just like to thank the committee and everyone for the help they've had for us, and we hope for more to come.
I'll just end with one little shout out. Ethan is your leading point scorer for all of Rhode Island's, not only for D1, but D2, but the leading scorer by everything. So shout out to him. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for coming tonight and making that comment. Chris, can you come back up? I just have a quick high-level question for you. If you don't have the information, certainly next week. So I just don't even remember exactly who we co-op with. So it sounds like the girls' hockey were in a co-op with North Kingstown and South Kingstown?
And Proud, I believe, too.
Okay.
Proud also? Yeah.
So there's 4 schools in the co-op. For the girls.
For the girls.
North Kingstown, South Kingstown, Narragansett, and Prout. And then for the boys' hockey, we co-op with Charahoe? Just Charahoe? Okay. So for next meeting, Chris, can you let us know how many Narragansett kids are on that team, like out of your school, a blankety blank, right? Are there 2 girls out of 400? Are there 11? Can you let us know for next week?
Absolutely.
Just so we can kind of understand the
Yeah, I can give you a
ratio
breakdown
here.
of the boys on the team and then the girls on the team, on each one.
And then can you let us know for next week, is it essentially like pay to play? Like, are we asking the kids, like, you can't be on our hockey team unless the parent writes a check for $250? Or is it more, can you speak on that next week or? Well, I'd like to hear from Chris,
Yeah,
but
I think that there's a set amount, from what I know right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but there's a set amount that the district pays, and then beyond that, I think it has to be funded by the parents to cover the extra costs. So anything beyond a certain amount, then it would be paid for. So again, and I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying that that's typically how it works.
Yeah.
When you have a facility that's not your own, swimming
Right,
and
yeah.
An ice rink are 2 of the most profitable businesses.
Yeah.
If we wanted to supplement the budget, we do those. We build 2 of those and we're in good shape.
yeah, okay. Yeah,
Suggest, right,
Sure.
is that, for our next meeting, Karen and I will get together with Chris and Matt, and we certainly will probably reach out to the hockey community, take a look at what the current costs are, what they've been over the last couple of years, and just get a little bit of the landscape, which, they alluded to in terms of how are districts contributing to hockey ice time across the state, and so that you can make a little bit more of an informed decision around what you want to do. And again, I think, everyone here is really, committed to our hockey program. We want to do right by our athletes. I am, the parent of 2, high school and now college athletes. I think we all want that. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting students in the right way while also being responsible to the community. So I think there certainly is a path forward there.
that sounds like a good plan, thank you. Any other questions about curriculum, student services, or Narragansett High School?
No, just to echo, just in general, the idea moving forward, it would be nice if we were to, I don't even know if this information is readily available or how difficult of an ask it would be to find how much each of these co-op districts are allocating to the co-op teams, just from a percentage. So that way when again, I know there's a lot of line items in our own districts, so I can only imagine how hard that might be to find in the other districts as well, but just to get an idea, that way we know how many students are on the teams and then what percentage of the budget other districts are also contributing to the teams.
It's an interesting question, because if it's a co-op with 4 schools, whatever the ice time, is it divided equally by all 4 school districts? I have no idea, but maybe you can somehow
But
figure
maybe
that
we can
out.
find out.
And just answer that at a high-level question. 'Cause I have no idea. Like, if
Right.
Prout has 1 kid and we have 11, are we paying the same amount as Prout? I don't know.
Usually it's broken down by
Okay.
athlete, so
Yeah.
it's prorated.
Well, if you could, it's interesting. So, yeah, just let us know next week.
I also just want to say, legislation-wise, I believe Rhode Island is not a pay-to-play state. And so just legislative-wise, I think we should look into, like you said, other districts, the co-op and such, because really, in state law, how I've read it, is that it should be a free and equitable education for all Rhode Island students. Understanding that, again, sports isn't the main portion of it, but as you so well stated, that the kids are motivated by it. It's healthy, it creates the community, and that's part of their education. That's why it's in part of it. So I appreciate everybody's willingness to explore and gather whatever information we can, so.
Sounds good, thank you. All right, we're on to the peer school.
A little bit. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for having us tonight. You know, I think this is a good opportunity too for me to extra thank Emily Chartier, Dean of Students, as I was out for the majority of the beginning of the year. So she did a fantastic job, you know, helping to work with the budget and creating, you know, working on what we're about to talk about. So I really want to make sure I commend her for that great effort. And, you know, she is here too to, you know, work together to kind of present this budget. So, you know, as in the past, we are continuing to see this decrease in enrollment, as was stated before, but we're still supporting the same work. We're still supporting the same students, just with less. So as we look towards kind of what we're aiming for in our budget, you know, we're still continuing with the social emotional learning piece that is really big for us, the academic piece, and then our curriculum initiatives. Some, as you know, even Dr. Denton had talked about, some regulated curriculum needs, and then others that, you know, we're catering to specific student needs and really working to meet the needs of all students. So what you'll see here first kind of on this slide is that we do have a decrease in some staffing. So a decrease in a 1.0 grade 6 teacher, again, based on the numbers. I believe it's 61 students in the 6th grade next year. So we'll be dropping down 1.0 grade 6 teacher. 1.1 special education teacher, which Dr. Denton also kind of, you know, made note of where that's coming from, and then a 0.1 Spanish language teacher. That mainly has to do with the enrollment from the 7th graders this year going into 8th grade next year, and the language in that area. We're not reducing a language opportunity for students, it's just the number of students and the need for the classes. As well as with changing needs, we did find a need for a 0.5 FTE for behavior to support the needs of some of our students in the regular education setting. So some kind of, you know, main differences that you'll see in the budget and you'll see reflected there is that there was a lot of work done with building thinking classrooms. We're promoting critical thinkers, we're promoting problem solving, collaboration among students. In my cover letter or cover sheet, it does mention for mathematics, but truly that is a typo. It should be for all subject areas. It's not just mathematics. You know, there's a, in my head, kind of pictured one of the math classrooms that we have that has a lot of these items in them, materials in them in support of this Building Thinking Classrooms initiatives. But this is really truly for any classroom and all classrooms to support students. You know, we know that technology is great for our students, and we understand that we have needs with technology, but then there's also these material needs of getting the students up and moving around and working on their critical thinking, problem-solving strategies, teamwork, and that sort of thing. So building thinking classrooms, we're trying to bring those materials to utilize in more classrooms for the following school year. So one would be resurfacing our chalkboards in the classrooms to whiteboards. So that would be kind of, you know, reutilizing, instead of bringing in just the whiteboards, it's actually a service that would come in to resurface them into whiteboards, which we have done before, and it has worked very well. And then movable whiteboards, which we have a few of them now, and they have been a great resource for students, really getting them up, moving, talking about the work, talking about problems that they have, and kind of working together in that area. As Mr. Fiore had said, you know, some of these materials, they're very popular now, and the prices, you know, are where they are. So again, you'll see that reflected in the budget. But again, I think they would be very beneficial to our students and to learning and adapting to changing student needs, while also working between technology and the physical need of getting up and moving around the classroom. And comes with the territory of a whiteboard is we do need supplies like erasers, markers, cleaner. It sounds small, but when we're utilizing these products over and over and over, you do end up kind of gathering some cost for that. And what I will say is we are grateful, and I think many of you have seen our learning labs that we've had, put together this year. Again, thanks to Ryan Canisette and Emily Chardier for, helping to get those up and running, and it has been an amazing addition to our school. Students are, I've walked into those classrooms and it's really exciting seeing the students work. They have, the tables that are whiteboards, again, the movable whiteboards, and just, flexible seating. When we talked about the Zen Den, that flexible seating, yeah, it did come at a cost, but I will tell you, in those rooms, there's that big collaboration is happening. And that Building Thinking's classroom initiative is happening, and it's really great to see. And as we shift to some of the curriculum resources and supports, we're continuing to support what we have in place. For example, we have CKLA in our 5th grade classrooms for our curricular ELA program, but we also are looking to gather some consumables, that have to be renewed each year, and then build on the classroom libraries. So building on a new curriculum, seeing kind of what those needs are, and working with the curriculum to support those classroom libraries. As well, in social studies, it's the HMH renewal of licenses. They have expired, so you'll see a little bit of an increase in cost there, just due to the renewal of those licenses. And looking at 1 year as the renewal, because we are looking into the new social studies standards and making sure that this program, the HMH renewal, will be, is that really what we're looking at the alignment of the standards and the new social studies standards with the current programming that we have. And we want to make sure that that's, appropriate and aligned for our students. And that work has already begun.
What's the name of the vendor product? Like the
Sorry, Houghton Mifflin.
Harcourt?
Harcourt, thank
Okay, and what's the CKLA stand for?
Core
What-
Knowledge Language Arts.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And we're continuing, use of our SAVIS programming for math and ELA, so it would be math, it's my perspectives, thank you. And so we're continuing those programs for ELA and mathematics. Again, green-lighted programs that we've adopted in our last budget, but, we do have to make some of those costs that, or allow for some of the costs that continue year to year. But again, these are our main changes in the budget. But again, we're still trying to meet the needs of all of our students and still trying to adapt to changes and, inflation costs and what have you. So again, continuing to work on social emotional needs. We are utilizing our ruler programming that was purchased by a grant, which is 3-year program, so that's not reflected necessarily in the budget, but we still are working on the social emotional learning piece by supporting our support staff. We have our student support counselor, assistance counselor working in the building, and we do have supports in there as well, but supported in other areas of the budget.
Can you go back to that other screens? So
Yes.
question about, so overall, it's a reduction in your FTEs. Can you talk about the 0.5 behavior? Is this going to take an existing part-time position and make it full-time? Or is this a newly created part-time position? Or is this someone that's going to be 0.5 behavior, 0.5 blankety blank special education? And what would this person do? Like, is this truly a half person, or is this paired with another job?
So this is a special educator position, right? That will be half special education, half behavior. That's actually a person that's had this, we've had this position in the past. We haven't had it for the last few years. Right now, we do need to bring it back. We have a population of students that are requiring some extra support, not necessarily through the special education lens, but through kind of a self-regulation lens, right? And learning to focus. We've had a lot of success with the Harbor program at the high school, so this would really be a connection to that high school Harbor program, particularly focused on our 7th and 8th graders and giving them the skills in order to get a little bit more self-regulation so that they can engage more in their learning.
One human who will be a special education teacher, who part of their time is their IEP caseload and IEPs and meetings and supporting students with disabilities, and the other part will be working with the principal and the mental health team, and that could be like general education students who are dysregulated or in crisis would access that. So she'd have her definite special education caseload and then would be partnering with mental health and the principal on the other
Absolutely.
piece.
Absolutely, and
Okay.
you know, some of these needs, obviously, we've already discovered that we have need for in the coming years, and you know, we host every week. We meet with a support team meeting, and we talk about, you know, students and how we can support students, and you know, so we're going to use those supports as well to incorporate this person, you know, to work on behavior, and again, as Dr. Cummings said, to integrate them and get them back into class and engaged in the work and really engage back into classes.
I think that's great. I love all these kind of innovative things. It gives me a lot of ideas. I really like it. It sounds great.
Thank you.
And I interrupted you.
No.
So before we take questions from the committee, did you have more to your presentation? Because I jumped in and interrupted you like
No,
4
no
times.
worries.
So sorry.
No, you're all good. You're all good.
I got excited.
No, it is exciting. I mean, you know, at budget time, we see a lot of things, and even the kind of ask that we're waiting for, we get excited for, you know. But I do think that Dr. Cummings has truly supported us throughout this budget, and again, really continuing, even with declining enrollment, to meet the needs of all our students, but also understanding that there is a reduction in students in our building. So trying to take both into account and be fiscally responsible in our building is really what we're about. And I truly believe that the budget we're putting forth, and again, that Emily Chardier has helped so much with, to really, she was really thoughtful in working as a team to make this, you know, working as a team with our professionals in the building as well, to work on what budget should we put forth that's going to make the best difference that we can.
So my question is, in addition, is there an ask, or is the ask included already?
So the ask is in addition.
Okay.
So, yes, yep. So, I mean, last year, I know when you had asked that, and this being my first year, you know, we talked a little bit about bringing some of the CTE into the middle school, and, you know, actually, we were able to do that within our budget this year. We have the agricultural programming for some of our students in the building, and we're hoping to build upon that, but that has been a great add. But this year, as we looked, we're looking at some kind of many different factors, and Gail kind of, you know, we joked, she already stole a little of the thunder, but, well, I would like to invite in a moment Lisa Wilson up to speak as well, because it's a middle school and an elementary conversation that we have had based on RICAS scores. In the middle school, we're using common tasks, which I know I've talked about at many of the school committee meetings, and then just looking at student writing samples, and we're identifying a need for a writing interventionist. And, you know, we're looking at that need both elementary and middle school level, so, you know, we kind of talk through being able to support that maybe between the two schools. You know, there's a lot that is being done in our classrooms. We do focus on writing in classrooms. It is part of regular, you know, regular education classrooms, but we do see a need for, within these writing samples, our scores, you know, in many different areas, that we do see a need for specific writing intervention. So I don't know if you want me to have Lisa come up at the same time, or if you want to save the elementary portion till.
We'll keep going with the peer school, and then Lisa can certainly speak on that. So that's interesting. So it's, the ask is 1.0, like FTE of a writing specialist to work at both schools that would be providing direct service to students through the MTSS process.
Correct.
That are struggling or below grade level or have some gaps and deficiencies in their writing, and then TBD on how it would actually be scheduled, but it's not a coach for the teachers, it's actually for, these are kids that we're gonna identify for extra scoops, just like they would get from a reading specialist, and, but to really target explicitly that based on RICAS, MTSS, all sorts of data points.
And they would be able to support, you know, doing some more of that screening and identifying specific areas for the writing. You know, that takes an incredible amount of time, but I do think, and we do see that as a need with our data that supports it.
Is Dr. Cummings hearing this for the first time, or has there already been discussion? Are you hearing this for the first time, Pete?
No.
Okay. Interesting.
Part of the MTSS process, it's required if we want to qualify kids for special education, that we have that intervention piece in in there, and that's been missing. So that's one piece that we've been missing.
So it's a requirement that's been missing.
It's a requirement that someone has to do it. So it's the responsibility of the classroom teacher to identify, do those tier 1 interventions, tier 2 interventions. But I don't disagree. When you, yeah. Come on up, because if there are people from home, they won't be able to hear you at all. Yep.
This is like dessert for me. I'll come out, I'll have my main course after. But this has been an ongoing conversation for several years, and finding the right person to do it would be essential. Two, really focusing on what is the intervention. We know that our kids struggle tremendously at RICAS, regardless of the intensive amount of teaching that they get in the area of writing. I can speak for grades 3 and 4. One is the stamina piece that we can work on within the classroom.
And if can I jump in just
Sure.
quickly on the stamina piece, because it actually brings, we just had a SIT meeting, actually right before this, from 4 to 5, and that was something that was brought up by a student about the common task system that we're utilizing. She said, wow, this is really helping to build the stamina, but, again, we're looking at, building that stamina and utilizing it to work on the writing piece.
But the other piece is the process of how to answer the question, how to formulate a response, and how to, it's really higher level, being able to put their thinking down on paper. Very often our kids can articulate verbally, but when they get that paper in front of them or their keyboard in front of them, and the keyboard is a whole nother piece, it is a tremendous task to get our 3rd and 4th graders and going into 5th graders to produce, to show what they know. And so it's the organization of writing, it's the strategies of how to answer questions, and how to become kind of critical thinker and show what they know. So those are the big areas that we want to address. And we have countless teachers, and even we did have our reading teachers, Gail did allude to that, to be spending some time on response to text, which is part of comprehension. But, a lot of their work is really working on the foundational skills of reading, and then that oral comprehension as opposed to the written piece. I mean, they do put it in as much as they can, but we have, if you look at our scores of 3rd and 4th grade, they struggle tremendously, and I think it carries on up into 5th grade. And we are also looking at, we use our writing rubrics and response to text in classrooms. It's just an area of need.
Right. And what I would add is that we have lots of kids that write really well.
And we do.
Right. And so, but there is a percentage of students who, with some additional intervention and instruction, would kind of get over the hump to get to proficiency on some of the accountability measures we have. But not just that, just become better writers, right? And that's what we want for them long term. For some of our students, they get that, and for a vast majority of our students, they get that in their regular instruction from their regular teacher. I would say about 30% of our students need some additional writing instruction beyond what they would get from their classroom teacher. That's really what this is targeted to, those 30% of students who just need that little extra push. And I was a writing teacher for a long time. You get better at writing by writing, right? And you need to do more of it, but you get better at writing with feedback, and writing with mentoring, and writing with examples. And that is exactly what this teacher would be doing, in addition to the core curriculum. And there are lots of good intervention models out there around writing. So in our discussions about this model, we're kind of at the point of where would it fit? And I think that would need to be figured out, because often the same students are in need of intervention in reading and in mathematics and in writing and in other areas, right? And so that is something that would need to be planned carefully. And so while I am not necessarily advocating one way or the other right now, what I would say is it's a demonstrated need, but I don't want the impression to be that, all of our students grades 3 through 8 have no ability in writing. We have lots of excellent writers, right? But we have a subset of students who do need some additional intervention.
And to echo that too, we are doing a lot of work within our classrooms to provide that extra instruction. Like I said, even the common tasks with the students saying, oh, wow, I'm building my stamina, but there are still, like we said, those certain students who do still need that extra help in writing.
And I definitely believe there's a need. I mean, it's the post-pandemic, we're still seeing, you know, that disruption in their learning and the pivot to virtual. We're still seeing those lasting effects. And what I really like at the elementary level, and all the schools do that, but the amount of like item analysis you do and looking at all these multiple sources of data, and then what you've done, you can see the growth that you've had in reading in 3rd and 4th grade. And so they definitely, you know, are strong learners with a strong skill set.
And that goes to part of our MTSS work, which would fall into this writing interventionist piece, is we do spend a lot of time providing supports and looking at what those kids' needs are, and this just keeps coming up.
And what's interesting too, Pete, is if, you know, we explored this some more, could possibly be a one-year ask, right? Like if you're looking at, I don't know, can you kind of speak to that? So like, let's say we have a short amount of time to try to kind of figure out if we were going to move forward and if we're going to fund it, but is that something that is a urgent need right now based on the data, but if it does the work that it does, then is it something that could come out of the budget next year? That's kind of my question.
Right. So, you know, what I would advise is right now, I think that you're looking at a couple of factors that are contributing to, for some students, a relative weakness in writing. You know, one is, you know, not everything is a COVID effect, but some of that is, you know, certainly a legacy effect of that for some of our students. They didn't get the early reading and early writing that they would have otherwise had. And so I think that's going to be a long-term issue for a group of our students. Two, I think that the nature of what many students do in their free time has changed, whereas 30 years ago, kids were reading a book, you know, and a lot of times you learn to be a better writer by doing more reading. There's not a lot of free time for some students. Some of our students always have their face buried in a book. We have other students who may be more interested in electronics or in computers or other pieces, and so are not doing as much independent reading as we might want them to do. That then has the long-term effect of affecting their overall literacy, part of which is writing, right? Three, you know, again, the pieces that students are seeing or writing, everything has become shorter, right? And so, you know, there are not long pieces that students are reading or writing either on the free time or in school anymore. Even the curricula that we are mandated to have doesn't have some of the longer and well-developed pieces that I wish that they had in order to really get students into understanding style and tone and syntax and word order and all of those different pieces. So all of those elements of writing in the long term, that has a cumulative effect of if we have a student that's impacted and is not quite where we want them to be in writing, you know, we do have targeted writing lessons, but some students just need a little bit more, right? And, you know, it's harder and harder for students to stay after school with families, and so we get less and less compliance, like with students being willing to stay after school for extra help or extra tutoring. Our teachers are willing to do it, it's getting the kids to stay. And so building this into our regular kind of practice would be an interesting pilot, right? Because I would give it, you know, a year to see what that data looks like. I would want to track through kind of a portfolio system where students are beginning and where they're ending, and really use some of the common tasks that the middle school has started piloting to really kind of see where kids end up, should it be something that the committee wishes to investigate further.
So questions from the committee or thoughts that you have about whether you want Pete to explore this, or what's your feedback or initial thoughts, if you have any?
I just have a general question, just for my own being of naive on this. I understand this committee's support for blended learning, the one-to-one laptop program. are we ever asking students to handwrite versus type? Just for my own education, because I know there's a lot, like me personally, I retain more when I handwrite versus type, and I just wasn't sure. You know, there's a lot of distractions today, and just wasn't sure, just for my own education and anyone at home, that we're not exclusively asking students to, when we say write, type only.
No, there's both.
There's a
Okay.
healthy mix, and I will say, some of what we've done with our common task work, just to be, transparent, is we're trying to also help with the format of RICAS. So sometimes we do want to integrate some of these on-demand writing assessments in the similar format that they're going to take a RICAS assessment, and it's because we want them familiar with it. But like Lisa and I echoing, I mean, absolutely, there is a healthy mix of both.
I'd say at the elementary level, it's more handwritten first
I
before it
figured.
transitions to the typing piece.
But thank you. Thank you for elaborating on that and providing clarity. And, I further echo the sentiment that's been shared already about the equitable access to these resources and taking care and consideration for all students' needs. And, just because there's not a overwhelming demand doesn't mean that there isn't a need. So I personally think that this is a great idea and worth exploring, and that's actually where I would stand on that. So
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
If I remember correctly, when we were utilizing that Columbia Teachers College writing program, our students were making very good progress. I think I'm remembering that correctly. It's too bad that Ed Reports didn't give that the green light, because it seemed like it was a very successful program.
You're preaching to the choir.
Okay.
And one of the things about the TC program, it was a nice fit for our district. When you look at the reading research, there were some deficits in the phonics program of that. But we, as a district, recognized that early on and supplemented that through different formats. Unfortunately, the way that the regulations and the law was passed was it's kind of an all or nothing. So we couldn't submit and say, we're going to use this with supplementing in the way that we've been doing. So that was an unfortunate piece for us.
just another question. When it comes to the ask, I believe it was a 1.0. What is the general split that you see that this interventionist would have between the two schools?
So we've been chatting about that. So it might be like a 0.4 at the elementary and a 0.6 at the middle school.
Okay.
But negotiable. We'd have to see with our scheduling
Okay.
how that works, but it would probably be grades 3 and 4 as our focus, and then it would be 5 through 8.
So you won't be having a tug of war?
No, we work well together. We would work well together.
Well, that is a big budget ask, so that's going to take some exploring
We appreciate
for you to come back with some choices for us, Pete.
Right, so I would recommend to the committee that Karen and I are kind of noting the asks and the different things to explore, and you know, towards the, at our next meeting, towards the end of this, we have kind of traditionally kind of come back to you and said, here's what it would cost for the things that you want to do, and the committee can make some choices around that.
Well, think of our ask as a little bit of a split among, you know, the different schools, and maybe Gail, she brought it up, so, you know, we can think of it spread around.
And Dr. Denton supported
Yes.
it.
Right?
Gail and Melissa's ask was to support that ask, so it's kind of,
We didn't know Gail was going to say that.
4 administrators are supporting the ask, so. And I'm sure the high school says, that'd be great, because if we can target that writing and improve their writing, that'd be great to
Well, that
prepare
would
the
only-
Then we
kids,
need
right?
tug of war.
So Chris is on board too.
That would only benefit all of their wonderful
Yeah.
programming for their AP coursework and all those wonderful things, too.
Then they can go in the Zen Den and
Yes.
and
No
stuff. Like
trade.
that. All right. Any other questions for the peer school from the school committee?
I have a couple. I don't know. How do you have a 0.1 reduction? If a teacher teaches 5 classes, is somebody only teaching a 0.1 of a class?
The special education, is it
Oh.
someone that's like 0.8 going to 0.7 or?
No, I'm
when it
looking at the
says-
Spanish language
Oh,
teacher?
Spanish.
Oh, okay, that teacher was utilized between buildings. So
But
they were
it would-
teaching in our rotating schedule. If you picture it as an ABC day, they were teaching a class that occurred on period 1 on A days only. So it was one out of the,
So does the actual human teach at the pier in the high school or the pier in the elementary school?
The actual human has resigned, and so that's a position that we don't need anymore. And so because of the reduction in students, we are offering less sections of Spanish for grades 7 and 8, so that .1 doesn't really have an effect on the number of classes that we need to offer. And so that was, we formerly had a combined position of ELL and Spanish. That was Christina Izzy. She left mid-year, and so we have filled that in with the ELL that is in place right now, that is a part of the special services budget, and the remainder of that Spanish will be at the high school.
So you have a part-time world language teacher at the pier school?
correct.
And they
for,
just do Spanish, or they do Spanish and French? Just Spanish?
one Spanish class in the 8th grade.
Okay.
Yeah, because, and like Dr. Cummings said, our reduction next year in the 8th grade will allow for us to reduce that class.
Just another comment. I really appreciate how well you all work together, because you guys are really trying to solve problems before they get out of hand, and that's really awesome. And just listening and watching your faces light up, and even Dr. Cummings, right, because that's your background. No, in all seriousness, like, the kids need help in writing. I don't know if we know the exact solution and how to get it, I don't know if it's more writing, because these kids grew up, specifically the ones that you're going to be targeting if we do get this, in COVID. But COVID aside, we got to look at technology. They were typing before they were writing, okay? I'm not a linguistic specialist at all whatsoever, but 100% support this, and I support it now. But I'm looking for a research piece to what exactly do we need to do? What program, what style, does it need tactile, like, to get the right person in there? I've studied the data of RICAS, and writing 100% was low. I watch students in those age groups who excel in math, excel in reading, and for some reason, their writing is like not there. And I can't figure it out. It's not because they're not reading, and they're reading some pretty high level things. Like, to me, there's like a disconnect. So I just don't know, like, what research piece or what, specialists you have here
There are
that could.
some great supports, and, for example, Jessica LaValle, our ELA coach, I've had some conversations with her, and she took a writing program, or she did it years back, but with AimsWeb, which is where we did the Right to Read program through, which actually one of our teachers right now is taking the same course and looking into some of the writing. So we're starting to, I mean, I know it's not within this position, but we know it's a need, and so trying to explore some of that. I mean, some of it was an initiative on a teacher's own. I just want to see, and I want to get involved with the writing. So our teachers have brought it to us and brought it to our attention in different meetings. It's been a big topic, like you said, and trying to identify what are those supports and what are going to be those research-based programs to tackle the intervention.
And just one solution just to think of forward, maybe you can't come up with a 1.0, right? But if you came up with a 0.8 or a 0.6, and then we really looked at enrichment and opportunities for writing and enrichment, just so, you're saving the money, you're able to pilot something, but you're not going 100% full in, which I know is hard. If you're going to hire somebody, obviously they need to make a living too, but just in general, to kind of like think creatively, because I know that age student wants enrichment and they fight for enrichment. It doesn't even matter what that enrichment is. They're like, I got an enrichment. And going in there and then being hyped up about, okay, we're going to write about this. Like, we're going to write about sea creatures, and it's going to all be about the sea. And we go and we visit the sea because we can walk there, and then we write about it. Like, there's other ways to kind of get around that without having to spend a 1.0 right now. I'm not saying don't spend anything on that. If we had the money, I would say that's the first thing that I would want. But think about maybe a way to not have to spend the 1.0 right now. That's just my 2 cents. But
All right, any other questions for the peer school? Any other community comment from the peer school? Okay, thank you very much. So we're on to the elementary school, our last item for tonight.
Can't see. All right, well, thank you.
Welcome back.
I'm very pleased to meet with you tonight to discuss the Narragansett Elementary School. As you know, our enrollment is remaining the same next year, pretty much. We are lucky enough to have our students, most of our students, well, 7 years, starting at preschool. So I think the things that I've highlighted for you, you might see that this slide is different than the one in your packet, by the way. There might be a little bit of a difference. After revision, I unfortunately had the flu last week, so I revised it again today. But I can speak to all the stuff on the original slide that you have in front of you as well. You know, one of the things, it's exciting to listen to my colleagues come up here and talk about their schools and the plans for their schools. I also feel that I'm lucky enough to have our students for 7 years and hopefully start a great background and start to their learning. We always are looking at academics and social development for our students. The first thing you're going to see is we really are remaining steady in all of our teachers, all of our interventionists. The only ask that I'm looking for the increase is a 0.2 to accommodate the fact that our library media person is spending more time doing his CTE programming. And I asked for an art, because right now she's 0.8, we'd like to increase that 0.2 to make sure of 2 things. One is our students have the opportunity to engage in some cross-content art exposure. Our new art teacher has the availability and knowledge to work with our current staff to really grow our art program. A great example that we just had this past music session was Ode to Chocolate, and she really dove in deep during our music performance and had the 3rd and 4th grade students make clay sculptures of heart-shaped chocolate boxes. The artwork, the pastel work was hot chocolate, and she just really took a hold on involving herself in the music program. She's so willing and able to also do that for the content in science and social studies and anything that we ask. So I thought this would be a nice fit to move that work. As far as our big curriculum needs, you'll see we're always, our big ticket item is science. Another big ticket item is our iReady work. That does help us with our growth in both reading and math. We're very happy with our current math. You won't see that I'm asking for any increase in the area of math supplies, and we don't need it. It's all consumables because we have all the materials that we actually need that we've been purchasing over the years. For CKLA, which was also the same ELA thing that the middle school was talking about, we already have great classroom libraries, so we don't need to grow ours. So you won't see a huge increase. You'll see an increase only for a small amount of money that we need for consumables that comes with the program annually. Another big thing that you might notice on my budget items was our field trips and special programs. Annually, every year, we had a swim program, and when COVID went away, it kind of went away, and we waited for the YMCA to be able to accommodate us. We've since now added that into our budget. It was kind of funded by families previously. Then we had the law change, but between that, we didn't have the need to fund it. but now we do, because it is part of our curriculum. So we've added that into our line items as something that all third graders go to. And they also have increased their fees substantially, so we had to make a bigger line item in that area. But I'm very pleased to say that we are very strong, and I think our RICAS scores prove that in our reading and our math programs. I really don't need to ask for anything more than what we already are using. Our science budget, our science is here, and it's always a large amount of money because it's the hands-on approach to teaching our elementary students, hands-on approaches to learning. So, and then the professional development that goes along with that. But other than those things, we are just continuing to grow and work with our children to get better and stronger. And that's really all I really wanted to say tonight.
Pete, the addition of that .2 art, was that in the budget we heard at our February school committee meeting? That's not something new, that was already in there from,
No, that's included
all right, thank you.
in the proposed budget.
I was
So
just giving you-
besides the,
So you already
writing-
I already got to ask my
okay, but there
ask.
wasn't anything
No,
additional to that?
this was a collaborative ask.
Yeah, all right. So what questions does the school committee have for the elementary school? Any questions or comments?
Or just a comment, you know, I'm very excited to hear about this proposal for the increase .2 in art for cross-content art exposure. You know, I actually still remember when I was an elementary school student in Narragansett, and one of my more favorite memories was this multicultural night that we had, which involved dancing, arts, and that was like shared between the classrooms, the PE program, all of the arts programs, and I don't know if you still do it, but I would love
I
to see
love
it
that
come
idea.
back.
And I have to say,
And,
our art teacher is also a dance
oh,
instructor as
there you
well.
go. Arts, music, PE, it was fun, it was engaging, it was, you know, social, emotional development, it was fantastic, so.
I like that
very
idea.
excited to see, and the .2 just seems like a pretty reasonable ask, and that's really all. Very impressed, and then making, you know, incorporating the swim back into the budget, I think is a very reasonable and very equitable ask, and I'm very happy to see that incorporated back in.
Any other questions or comments from the school committee?
I just want to comment that one of my children did not get access to the swim for COVID, and it's so important for where we live, for safety, respect of the ocean, being able to walk down your street, and you know, it's just so important that just for where we live, and I 100% support that too. I mean, there's so many things on here that I feel like are well thought out, you know, and equitable and all these things, but is there any way to not go through the Y? Or is it because it's so close?
I
Because you
think
go
it is
during
so
school?
close because it's during the school day. It does take an enormous amount, even though it's so close, even the whole changing aspect, getting all
Yeah.
those kids changed, they are, it's about a 7 or 8 week course, and they're out of the building for a bit of time.
Yeah.
So it does cut into the day. If we went to another pool, and
Yeah.
I think I know which one you're thinking of.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking
It
of.
might be a little bit
much.
more difficult.
Okay.
I would also add, you know, we are very concerned and focus a lot on safety with the swim lessons, that when you look at kind of schools and pools like across the country, you know, many schools have done away with their swim programs due to safety concerns. The Y works with us really closely, and our teachers do a fabulous job of making sure everyone's safe, especially with young and new swimmers. And so I agree. You know, the Y, I think, is a good partner. Their costs have gone up. They've passed those costs on to us, but it's close, and that's That's a pool where it's fairly contained. If you've never been there, it's, I've gone over a couple of times just to check out the swim program, and it's pretty contained.
We can invite you to come see. It's pretty cool.
Like you said, just the proximity of everything. The parking lot, the locker rooms, the pools.
I mean, I also remember, I remember doing the swimming program at the YMCA. See, this is all coming back to me.
Thank you, Paul McCaffrey. I
And
believe
it's-
he's one of the ones
and I-
that's helped start it.
I feel like the convenience is definitely a big part of it, because even reflecting on it, I couldn't believe that happened during the school day. So it was amazing that
We're
we
a
were
very
able to do
fortunate
that.
community to be able to do this.
Yeah.
Right, so any other questions from the school committee? Well, big thank you to all of the administrators here tonight. We really appreciate all of your hard work, all your input, your willingness to take questions. Any other questions from the community for the elementary school? Nope. All right, so Pete, do you need any information from the school committee? Or if we have any questions or comments, we definitely need to get those to you in the next week. But anything that you need to ask us before we adjourn tonight, Pete?
No, so we are scheduled for 6 o'clock at our next meeting, so that was the published piece. Our next one are our support service, so that'll be technology, operations, and transportation, okay? If there are not any, if you're able to come to consensus, right, and I will kind of give out to you your options for from our discussions tonight around potential increases or changes to the budget, all right? You all can decide to approve the budget at the next workshop, or if you would need a third workshop, you can decide to do it at that time.
And we'll actually take our vote at the March school committee meeting, but what we really want to do is to be able to give you and Karen consensus next week. We need a whole nother workshop, or, all right, you gave us kind of some options about, well, we could contribute less to the pension this, or we could do this with something, You'll give us those kind of menu options tomorrow, so we can, next week, so we can give you direction. So then when we're back in March for the vote, we'll have heard things, you'll have gotten our input, made our tweaks, and,
Correct.
okay. All right. Anything else from the school committee before we adjourn? Is there a motion to adjourn at 8:14?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.